applying to the Putin regime. And I think one thing is clear. Vladimir Putin miscalculated two things. He miscalculated the strength of the Ukrainian resistance, and he also miscalculated and underestimated the strength of Western unity and Western resolve to ensure that Putin must fail.
Thank you.
Thank you. Raghi Omar on behalf of all British broadcasters. There's a question to all three of you, actually. Kharkiv city is under heavy bombardment. The capital, Kiev, is being surrounded and has a column of heavy armor stretching somewhere between 25 and 30 miles towards it. Do you think that given the tactics being deployed by Russian forces edging towards indiscriminate use of munitions in civilian areas means that, given Russia's overwhelming superiority, that cities in Ukraine, including the capital, will inevitably fall? And then one specific one for you, Prime Minister Johnson. The UN Security Council is at the heart of the system of global peace and security. Britain, like Russia, is a permanent member. Do you think that you would support moves to suspend Russia from the UN Security Council?
Okay, start. Yes, what we are seeing in Ukraine is really very horrifying to see what kind of steps they are taking and how they are, escalating this crisis. The question whether the cities will fall, I think we underestimate the Ukrainians' motivation and will to protect their cities. Of course, we also know that the forces are not really equal. So one is to really conquer the cities, and the other one is to keep those cities under control. So I think there's going to be a lot of resistance from Ukrainians, and this, even if temporarily Russia takes hold of the cities, it's still very hard to keep. And as there is no support from the Ukrainian side. So I think what we have seen, and all Ukrainians have really surprised everybody, is by their motivation to fight for their country, to fight for their freedom. I think the same would be here, because we have already lost our freedom once, and we don't want to lose it second time. So I think all the nation is up to defend their country and to take it back, even after building the resistance in the nation, really, to take those back.
Yes, and just Raghi, on your point about what's happening in Kharkiv, it's absolutely sickening. And if it reminds me, if anything, if you remember the shelling of Sarajevo market by the Serbs, the shelling of innocent people in Bosnia, it has that feel to me of an atrocity committed deliberately against a civilian centre. And I think that coming to your second point, within the UN structures, it's very difficult to move people without a vote, and clearly where you have a majority, where you have a veto in the Security Council, you can't. There's a paradox. We can't vote to change the rules without the agreement of the Russians. But what is happening is that I think that the great middle of the UN congregation, if you like, is starting to realise quite how horrific this is. And with every day that goes by, as they watch the heroism of the Ukrainian resistance, and they see what's happening in Ukraine, and they see episodes like the shelling, like the missile in Kharkiv, and the destruction of civilian populations, I think people's stomachs are being turned by what's happening, and they're seeing that it is necessary to stand up against Russian aggression, to support the Ukrainians, and to endorse our strategy, which is that President Putin must not be allowed to succeed. He must fail in Ukraine.
So what we now see is a new wave of attack against Ukraine, against innocent people, and a column of heavy Russian armor which is moving towards Kiev will bring more death, more suffering and more civilian casualties. And that's the reason why we need to continue to provide support to Ukraine, why we continue to call on Russia to stop this bloody war, and why we need to impose costs by the heavy sanctions on Russia. And why we also should once again commend the bravery and the courage of the Ukrainian people, the Ukrainian armed forces, and also the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. This is horrifying, this is totally unacceptable, and it's a blatant violation of international law.
Thank you.
Alexander Bilak, Delphi News. Question to Boris Johnson. By the middle of March, the UK will have sent here about 2,000 troops. That's definitely a big support for us. But what would happen? What would have to happen, or what would be the trigger point for you to double it or triple it, or what's the limit?
Well, thank you very much. We're very proud to be working here with our friends, with our French friends, with our Danish friends, and of course with our wonderful Estonian hosts. And I'm delighted that we're doubling it. It's a big commitment that we're making. I think that we'll always keep things under review. But what you can take it from me that our priority is the safety, the security of our friends and partners across the whole of the eastern frontier of NATO. And we're increasing our presence not just in Estonia, but in Poland, in the skies above Romania, in the eastern Mediterranean, in the Black Sea. The UK is beefing up our presence on NATO's eastern flank. And the message we need to get over, and I think we are collectively, all of us, is that if Vladimir Putin thinks he's going to push NATO back by what he's doing, he's gravely mistaken. This will end up with a fortified and strengthened NATO on his western flank. He'll have more NATO, not less NATO.
Thank you. Unfortunately, this is all the time we had. Thank you everyone for coming.
Danish television. I go on. Something tells me you'll have a brilliant question.
Yes, of course I will. You've doubled your number of troops here at the base in Tapa. Denmark is due to arrive next week.
Yes.
Would you like to see Denmark increase the number of troops here as well?
All I can say is that I had a great conversation with Mette, with your Prime Minister, the other day. She was fantastically robust. I think she understands the problem very well. I'm glad that Denmark is increasing its contribution. We work well with our Danish friends, and of course it's always good that Denmark is contributing more. But I hesitate to go beyond that. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Based on the questions that you got, based on the questions, Marika Walsh with the Globe and Mail, this morning you got some tough questions from a Ukrainian reporter. And today, this afternoon, you're telling the crowd here, we as the international community have responsibility to do everything we can to help the Ukrainians in their efforts. So are you actually doing that if you are not granting the request from Ukraine for a no-fly zone?
Thank you. And I just want to get back to the points that Kaya and Jens and all of us have made today. It is very, very important to understand that NATO is a defensive alliance. This is a time when miscalculation and misunderstanding is all too possible, and it's therefore crucial that we get that message over. That does not mean that we cannot help our friends, or it does not mean that they do not have a right to self-defense, and we can help them in that self-defense, and that is what we are doing. When it comes to a no-fly zone, which is I think what you asked, in the skies above Ukraine, we have to accept the reality that involves shooting down Russian planes. As I said in an answer to I think the first question, that's a very, very big step. It is simply not on the agenda of any NATO country. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you everyone. This concludes the press conference. Thank you for following.